So welcome to CGS's first webinar of the year, Understanding PhD Career Pathways for Program Improvement, Preparing Your Proposal. We're delighted that you could join us today. I'm Julia Kent, and I'm among the speakers you'll be hearing from today. But as we get started, I wanted to direct your attention to some documents that you can refer to during the presentation if you have not already printed out the requests for proposals that we'll be discussing today. There are two ways to get to these documents. One is through the box marked handouts, which you'll see in the bar on your screen. If you click on that, you'll find the implementation guide, the request for proposals, and the taxonomy of fields. But you can also get to these documents by opening the chat box, which is the last box on your bar, and there you will find the CGS webpage that includes all of the materials and information that you will need to have about this project and about preparing your proposal to participate. So with that, I am going to briefly talk about our plan for today. Our presentation will be about 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll follow that by questions and answers. You'll submit questions through the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen, so you can type these in, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible during the time we have allotted. And the webinar recording and slides will be emailed to all participants and also posted on the CGS website. So if you can't stay for all of the presentation or you would like to share it with colleagues, it will be available within the next couple of days. If you have technical issues during the presentation, please go to the link on your screen. That's the fastest way to get help. And we'll talk a little bit more about troubleshooting audio problems next. So if you have trouble hearing us, you can switch to a different connection. The most reliable way to get audio is through your telephone connections. You can switch from that by clicking the appropriate button that you see indicated on your screen. And if you have problems with your telephone connection, click problem dialing in and you'll get an alternate telephone number to dial. So I'm just going to pause here for a moment and turn the presentation over to CGS President Suzanne Ortega, who will say a few words about the goals of this project before we get started.
Thank you, Julia, and good afternoon, colleagues. We are extremely pleased at the high number of registrants for today's webinar, reflecting, I think, the real national awareness of the importance of two universities of having better understanding of both the aspirations of their doctoral students in terms of career, but also the career outcomes of their PhD alumni. The problem, of course, affects all fields, but particularly in the humanities, the absence of information about careers is particularly pressing. And consequently, we are very grateful to Mellon Foundation for making it possible for this project and our efforts to fill some of this gap in our knowledge. We will be learning soon whether we have a science funder to support similar work in the sciences, and I believe Julia will say a little bit more about this in a moment. As you know, this project has been underway for approximately 3 years. Beginning with a broad effort to gain advice from a whole range of key stakeholders, from disciplinary associations, other higher education associations, funding agencies, and our doctoral students and alumni themselves. These groups provided input not only to CGS, but to the advisory committee that helped us craft all of the documents that you have before you or that Julia mentioned. It is both the implementation guide, but also the survey for current students and for PhD alumni. I want to say a quick word about the survey instruments, and perhaps you will have other questions. The importance of the instruments, this is important, I think, to note about the instruments. They were designed to be concise, useful, and ultimately sustainable, to be of use to programs and to graduate deans and to universities in addressing program improvement goals and strategies. While they will not, I think, provide answers to every conceivable question you would have about the careers of your alums and the aspirations of your PhDs, we believe that they will, in fact, give you the data you need to answer the most important questions. In addition to simply the data collection and the information we will glean about the whole diversity of careers of our doctoral recipients, I think it's really important to understand that the project really is designed to help you in your efforts to, one, communicate your support for career diversity of PhD students, two, to make data-driven program improvements, three, to give you access to anonymized benchmarking data so that you can compare the career outcomes of your partner, of your students, with those of project partners, and to join a group of institutional leaders that are committed to improving career preparation for PhDs. Throughout the course of the project, graduate deans will have opportunities to share what they have learned in national forums like the CGS annual meeting and summer workshop. So without further ado, we look forward to sharing more about this opportunity and the proposal process with you, and I will turn the microphone back to my colleagues.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'll give a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. After this introduction, Hironao Okahana will discuss the project activities and give you some more information about the instruments that Suzanne mentioned, the student survey, the alumni survey, and the implementation guide. From there, we'll turn it over to Maureen McCarthy, who will address proposal preparation, selection process and criteria, and our timeline. And then we'll close with Q&A. So as Suzanne mentioned, this grant opportunity is for a 2-year project as far as institutional partners work is concerned. Any U.S. doctoral granting CGS member institution is eligible to apply, and as the RFP makes clear, consortia of CGS member institutions are also eligible to apply. Now, to clarify, there are 15 awards of $30,000 each for over 2 years, and if a consortia chooses to apply, consortia members would share the $30,000 award. And the main activity of institutional partners is to implement surveys developed by CGS, to collect data, and then also to use the data that they collect to inform improvements of their doctoral programs. As Suzanne mentioned, there is a possibility of a STEM funder. We expect to know by March of this year. We are hopeful that we will know by March of this year whether we can offer additional funds to support data collection in STEM fields. When we know the status of that funding, proposal for funding, we will inform all institutions before the grant deadline, the proposal deadline, so that you have an opportunity to amend your proposal. But regardless of the STEM funding status, we are making it clear in the RFP that institutions that plan to include STEM fields in their data collection will be most competitive because that will be a sign of broader institutionalization of the projects. Next, we'd like to call your attention to the web page for this project. This page should really give you everything you need to know about the project and includes all of the documents, including the cover form for the proposal and the field taxonomy that you'll need to consult in preparing your proposal to participate. Suzanne has also already mentioned the benefits of participating in this project, but we include this slide in this presentation in case you would like to share this presentation with interested colleagues. We understand that you will want to build the case on your campus for participating in this project, and so we include this slide here. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Hiro, and he will continue with the discussion of the partner activities.
Thanks, Julia, and welcome everybody to this webinar. So this project entails 4 major activities for partnering institutions to commit to. The first one is data collection. We'd like institutions to develop an implementation plan for 2 waves of alumni and student surveys each, so the total full survey administration during the funded period. So come up with a plan and actually administer the data collection effort at your campus for at least 3 humanities field. And the second component is to use the data you collected. We would like you to come up with the ways to analyze the data you collected using our survey instrument and utilize the resulting data for program improvement for your doctoral programs. And the third component is to share the data with CGS. We would like you to share the data you collected by using our data collection instrument with CGS so that we can aggregate the data and create the national benchmarking data set for you to compare the career diversity of your doctoral graduates and the career aspirations of your doctoral students against that of other institutions who participated in this project. So this is a really important part because when you collect your data and ask for IRB approval, you have to make sure that you're notifying them that you'll be sharing your data, the student level data, with the CGS so that we can do the data aggregation on our own. And then lastly, that we'd like you to participate in the related research activities about this implementation of this survey instrument as well as the use of data into your program improvement. This is our commitment to Mellon Foundation to find out the promising practices in implementing this type of surveys and sustaining the data collection efforts as well as the use of data in doctoral curricular decisions. The eligibility, as Julia mentioned, this is open for U.S.-based regular members of CGS, and those institutions must have awarded since academic year 2001 to 2002 and currently award PhDs in at least 3 of the following humanities field showing up on your screen. The full list of taxonomy is also attached to RFP and the related documents if you're looking for the fine field that's included in those humanities fields. Also, as Julia noted, if an individual institution cannot meet this requirement, say you only awarded doctorates in English and history, what you can do is you can look for the institutions maybe offer the foreign language or arts or philosophy or an all, and meet this eligibility requirement of at least 3 humanities field collectively and submit application as a consortia. But when you submit a consortia, you can only apply for $30,000 a subaward as well. So in the RFP package is an implementation guide. As Suzanne noted, this implementation guide as well as survey instruments are a result of a long process that we engage advisory committee, institutional leaders, disciplinary associations, federal agencies, students, and alumni. And this implementation guide is an integral part in informing your proposal writing process. In the implementation guide, you will find some of the required activities and the parameters for this project. For example, we have the timing for survey and which survey to use, and those are prescriptive part. But some other parts are more the guidance for recommended strategies for your institutions to develop your plan that makes sense out of your institutions. For example, how to use the data, who to share the data, and who you want to work with in doing the successful data collection efforts. While we want you to stick to some of the prescriptive part of the implementation guide, but when you're writing your proposal, we encourage some creativity in thinking about how you can best use the data to be collected and the best to inform your doctoral program for improvement. In the surveys, so we have two surveys, the student surveys and the alumni surveys. And these questionnaire items are derived based on some of the national surveys that's out there conducted by National Science Foundation and other federal agencies. As Suzanne mentioned, it may not capture every unique details of humanities career diversity or a unique program that your institution might offer. But this is intended to inform program improvement as well as to create some opportunity for national benchmarking across different institutions. So that was the part that we negotiated through in coming up. In terms of using this survey for this project, you're welcome to append additional questions that meet your institutional needs, as long as those questions do not expand the survey burden significantly. However, to make sure that we can create the robust pool of national benchmarking data, that you cannot delete any questions that are already included in our survey instrument. And also another note is, you as an institution and a graduate school will be administering these data and working on primary data collection. So you will need to get appropriate IRB approval to participating in this program, this project. And also keep in mind that whatever the data you collect, the CGS will need you to share the individual level data set as well. So when you submit for IRB approval, make sure to include those notation. And in terms of the survey items, alumni survey captures current and past employment status, and as well as the doctoral student experience. And these survey will be administered in the fall semester, so fall 2017 and the fall 2018. The participating institutions will send out these survey to doctoral alumni 3, 8, and 15 years out of your program. And for student surveys, we are trying to capture the career aspirations and the professional development participation of current doctoral students, and the participating institutions will administer these survey in spring semester, so spring 2018 and the spring 2019 for those doctoral students in their year 2 and year 5 of their doctoral studies. Now I'm going to turn over the microphone to Maureen. She'll talk about a proposal preparation.
Thank you, Hiro. So now that you have a better idea of what the project entails, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to prepare the proposal itself. The proposal consists of a few basic elements. A cover form that's included as an attachment to the RFP, so that you can access on that RFP webpage. A proposal narrative, and we'll talk a little more about what goes in there, and supplementary materials such as budget narrative, and at least one letter of support from your university president or provost. So for this project, the project director must be the graduate dean at your institution or the equivalent administrator. You can name a co-director, and you can name a co-director as whoever makes the most sense at your institution, but the graduate dean must be named as the primary project director. You must commit to collecting student and alumni data in at least 3 of the 5 largest humanities fields. Hiro mentioned that there were the 3 fields that you commit to collecting data in must also meet the other eligibility criteria that Hiro mentioned earlier, that you've been awarding degrees since the 2001-2002 academic year, and that you have done that continuously up to the present. And this is so that we have, as he was saying, a robust data set of comparable data from all of the participating institutions for alumni up to 15 years out and currently enrolled students. We're also asking that you provide evidence of an application for IRB approval in your proposal. So a selection committee will be reviewing all the proposals, and they will be instructed to weigh the following criteria. We often like to, in CGS grant programs like this, see evidence of prior reforms in graduate education so that we know that your institution has experience with implementing reform efforts successfully and sustainably. The proposal narrative should outline a clear plan to implement sustainable data collection efforts, analyze the data in a timely manner, communicate the results to relevant stakeholders, use the data to inform program improvement, and sustain data collection beyond the grant period. The implementation guide, specifically pages 6 through 10 of the implementation guide, can provide some ideas about how to do this, who the relevant stakeholders on your campus may be, what kinds of ways you might think about using the data for program improvement, and how you might think about implementing the collection and data use into already existing processes at the university. As Suzanne mentioned, the goal of creating these surveys was really to give you something that could be sustainably used. The proposal narrative should also demonstrate, some of the basic things that you're used to demonstrating: the capacity of the project team to complete the work, evidence of strong institutional support beyond the graduate school. We think that this project in particular is one where places like institutional research offices, perhaps alumni or career offices, would really be instrumental in both providing institutional buy-in but also some expertise and needed support for the project. And of course a reasonable budget. If you anticipate that the budget for implementing the surveys and using the data will exceed the $30,000 award amount, we are asking that you include the amount and sources of additional support in your budget so that we can take a look at your institution's plans as a whole. We're also asking for a data management plan, since this is a data collection project. So your plan for protecting human subjects, analyzing and using the data, storing it securely, and also, as we mentioned before, for obtaining IRB. So the most competitive proposals will expand data collection beyond the required humanities fields. We would love to see institutions implementing the surveys in all of the fields that they award doctorates in, whether or not they've been doing so for the full 15-year periods. For the purposes of eligibility, it would need to be at least those three, but the broader the data collection effort, the more competitive the proposal will be. And we, again, also want to see just a reasonable understanding of what your budget would be, and that you will be engaging partners throughout your university or the consortium if that's your situation. Our first deadline is February 15th. We're asking that you submit a letter of intent. This is not required, but we are asking for letters of intent so that we can cultivate proposals from a diverse range of institutions, and that includes regional diversity, Carnegie classification, public-private, all manner of differences. This will enable us to also to alert you and make sure that you are aware of any STEM funding if that comes down the pike, so that we are able to really communicate directly with you in that event. This doesn't need to be very formal, but we think it makes sense for this to come from the desk of the graduate dean, the letter of intent. So the proposals are due May 1st. The selection committee will review proposals in May and June. June 2017, decisions will be announced, and the grant will start on July 1st. It's a tight timeline. The first project directors meeting will be at the CGS Summer Workshop, which is July 2017. And the first wave of data collection of the alumni survey will be fall 2017. And there will be 2 rounds of data collection, and the grant end date is June 30th. All right, I think that about covers it, so we're ready to start answering some of your questions.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you to all of you for submitting some very good questions. We've had them rolling in throughout the presentation. I'll be reading these out, and the team of presenters will address these as appropriate. I'd like to just say that if for some reason we don't get to your question today, we will be sure to follow up with you and make sure that your question is answered. So the first question is, will there be additional funding if STEM is included in the proposal? The answer to that question is yes, if and only if we get funding from a science funder. So that is contingent upon funding from the science funder, and we expect that the amount of funding, additional funding, would be equal to the $30,000 for the humanities if we do receive that funding. The next question is, are the social sciences considered STEM or humanities? The answer to that question is they are considered STEM, science, and you can refer to the taxonomy if you have any questions about where a particular program falls. One thing we just wanted to make clear before we go on any farther is that this project focuses exclusively on PhD programs. So EDDs, PsyDs, etc. are not included in the data collection. If for some reason you would like to do that additionally at your institution, you're of course welcome to do so. But the instruments were developed specifically with the PhD in mind, and that's what the funding will primarily support. The next question. Our university does not offer any STEM PhDs, only humanities. Should we bother submitting a letter? In our case, lack of STEM participation is not evidence of a lack of institution-wide commitment to understanding career pathways. We simply don't offer STEM PhDs. I'll pass this question to Suzanne Ortega to respond.
So the answer to the question is absolutely, you should still consider submitting a proposal. I think it would be good to simply indicate in the proposal and even in your letter exactly what your question says, that our university only offers PhDs in humanities fields, and thus this represents a wide range of degree programs at our university and broad institutional commitment. So it's absolutely the case you should submit. I think I want to make one additional point that may not be clear, and I think it's related. And that is that Mellon has provided funding to collect data in the humanities, but they are absolutely comfortable with any institution wanting to use this project as a way of collecting data in the sciences as well. They're very, very happy if that happens. So just to clarify, the reason we're encouraging you to think about STEM as well, even if we don't get additional funding.
All right. The next question is about the number of PhDs awarded in the fields about which we'll be collecting data. So how important is the number of PhDs awarded in the fields in terms of competitive priority? So if a particular field only graduates 2 PhDs per year or 5 PhDs a year, is that going to be an issue?
Well, I guess I'm going to, this is Suzanne, and I'll say a couple words, and then I'll let Hiro add anything additional he'd like to say. I would simply start out by saying, for the purposes of data analysis, if everything else were equal, larger programs and with larger numbers of students and degree recipients would be an advantage. But all else is seldom equal. For example, there are far fewer PhDs produced in some fields than in others, so a small number is simply an accurate reflection of the size of the discipline itself. And we are also really interested in getting a mix of disciplines at a range of institutions in a range of regions of the country. If you submit a proposal and have one or more of the participating programs that are pretty small, it really would be important for you to think through what your strategy will be for sharing data for program improvement and how you will protect the anonymity, particularly of current doctoral students. Hiro, would you like to add anything?
No, I think so. Just to Suzanne's point, when there are fewer doctoral recipients, it becomes more important for us and your institutions to make sure that the privacy and the confidentiality is kept. But with that said, this survey is meant as the tool for program improvement at your institutions. So regardless of the number of doctoral degrees conferred, and knowing that for some humanities field, that sample size may be small. But if you have a compelling case or a compelling proposal to really show that how you'll be utilizing these data in value-added way for your program governance, that certainly plays well in the competitiveness of the proposal.
All right, thank you. The next question has to do with data analysis. One of the questions we received is, what exactly does CGS expect participating universities to do in terms of analyzing their own data? And with this question, I think we would like to refer you to the implementation guide that provides some guidance on this question. If you look at page 12 of that guide, you can read our very broad guidelines for your approach. But I'll also just ask Hiro and Suzanne to say a word about this if they'd like to.
So for our purpose, when we aggregate data from all the participating institutions, we'll be doing some descriptive and some advanced analysis, if possible, to really assess the overall picture of career diversity of doctoral degree recipients, as well as the diversity in the career aspirations of current doctoral students. But as far as what institutions do with these data collected, I think this is the part that we are asking you to be very creative and purposeful about embarking on this type of data collection effort. The ultimate goal for these instruments is to be utilized for program improvements. So some of the examples we included in page 14 and 15 is this is something you can use for program review purposes, or you can use some descriptive data as a data point or talking points for your advocacy efforts. And there's no prescription around how you should be using it, so long as that you're protecting the privacy and of the human subject, that the students that you're asking the data from. But beyond that, this is really the part I would encourage you to be creative in preparing this proposal and working with your campus constituents to see what kind of data points would be useful and value added in discussion.
I think it's just another way of saying exactly what Hiro said, but it goes like this. If I were a dean sitting trying to figure out what CGS meant by this, I'd be trying to figure out how I was going to make use of the kinds of information I thought it was likely I would collect, given what I know about the size of programs, and be developing a strategy less about statistical analysis than how I'm going to use the data, in what kinds of conversations, in what kinds of settings, with what key stakeholders, faculty, directors of graduate studies, with the provost or president. So it's really more a data utilization plan than a data analysis, I think, that we're really after.
All right. Related to that question, we've had another. Will the individual level data need to include identifiable data such as name, etc.? The answer to that is no. Do you want to elaborate,
Yeah.
Hiro?
So the survey instrument does not, well, let me back up. Towards the end of each survey instrument, there are voluntary release section. So if institutions are interested in doing a follow-up study that say connect the survey response with your administrative records, towards the end of the survey instrument, there's a question about a voluntary release of personally identifiable information, namely asking a student ID number if they're interested in being part of additional study by your institution. And also there's a similar question for the voluntary release of contact information for respondents to release email address or other contact information to CGS for our possible additional follow-up study that collects it beyond this information. But the basic part of the survey instruments we have does not require students to give a name or student ID number or contact information. But of course, to keep in mind that because we are asking the demographic question as well as the field of study and when these students or alum has started their doctoral education or earned their degree, if your institution have very few number of doctoral graduates in particular field of study, some of those demographic information may lead to identify respondents. That's why we cannot place enough emphasis on the need for, and is in fact the requirement for your proposal to seek IRB approval of some type, whether full approval, which we definitely encourage, but if your institution provides some type of exemption letter, but we encourage you to consult with your IRB office.
Right. There's a related question on IRB and the timing of that. Does the proposal need to include a plan for IRB, or must we have obtained IRB approval before May 1st, the proposal deadline? The answer is that it does not need to be approved before May 1st, but it must be approved by the time of the award, which begins on July 1st. It can be under review at the time you're submitting the proposal. We have a series of questions here about a number of things. We may not get to all of them, but we'll try. A clarification on the question of additional funding. Will additional funding mean additional awards or larger awards?
And the answer is it means larger awards.
Moving on, who will serve on the selection committee? I'll try to address that. CGS selection committees are typically made up of graduate deans in the CGS membership who do not plan to put in a proposal to participate in an award competition. And in the case of this selection committee, we also plan to include a few additional experts, possibly advisory committee members and consultants. The next question is about the taxonomy. Does the taxonomy of fields align with SIP codes? Hiro?
So the taxonomy we use is the one we've been using for our graduate enrollment degree survey as well as the international survey. So it's not completely similar to the SIP codes, but for the most part it's overlap with the SIP codes. But if your institution has been submitting the data to our CGS GRE survey or graduate enrollment degree, these fields should align with what you have been submitting the data to us.
Okay, and next question. If an institution were to apply but not get funded, could we still participate as non-funded institution? The answer is yes, and we're very excited about this possibility. As with previous CGS best practice projects, we will have a category of partners called affiliates, who are partners who participate in all of the activities of the project but do not receive grants, and they will benefit from many of the same opportunities that our funded partners will. Next question, is there a specific letter of intent form or page limits? This is addressed in the request for proposal. There is not a specific form. You should plan to submit a one-page letter on institutional letterhead signed by the graduate dean. It does not need to be long or detailed. It should just express your intention to put in a proposal to participate. Question about consortia. For consortia proposals, does the PI need to be a graduate dean? The answer is yes. You can also designate co-PIs or co-project directors, both of which are graduate deans, or one a graduate dean and the other someone else. We understand that with a consortia proposal and with really any kind of proposal, there may be other individuals at your institution who may be playing a lead role, and that is in fact encouraged. But because this project was developed with the goal of helping graduate schools institutionalize these surveys and the processes surrounding them, we believe it's important for the graduate dean to be the primary PI or project director on the proposal. Next question, what are your parameters for submitting proposals with other institutions? Should institutions submitting a consortia proposal have a pre-existing partnership? I think that's not necessarily a requirement. It's certainly not a requirement that we have made explicit. I think that if you do have a previous relationship with other institutions in your consortium, and a history of working together, especially a successful history, we will certainly want to know about that in the proposal. Okay, we have a number of field taxonomy questions. Would a PhD in moving image, such as film studies, count as a humanities field? The answer would be yes, but it would not count towards eligibility in one of the largest fields that we are requiring. If our degree is interdisciplinary in the humanities, are we still eligible if we can determine the specific field, e.g. from committee members and transcripts?
I think the answer to that, in fact, I know we'll just make it, the answer to the question is yes, but you will want to talk about the ways in which you intend to identify the discipline that underlies, or the major area of major discipline.
The next question is, if we don't meet the criteria for humanities, should we prepare a proposal in anticipation of the STEM portion being funded? I think this gets back to the question of whether whether these are these awards will become larger or greater in number if we receive funding from a STEM funder. Perhaps Suzanne can address that question.
I think that the real intention has been to get the broadest range of programs at universities to participate, with the idea that broad-ranging participation is one of the ways you can move towards institutionalizing as a routine matter of practice data collection on career aspirations and outcomes. We know that these projects are likely to have real costs of more than $30,000, and so our real commitment is to try to secure the funding to make it, to add some resources to the data collection project. So the answer to will the awards be larger or will there be more of them is basically there will be larger awards. However, if you do not believe that you're competitive in the humanities, you should know that we're cautiously optimistic about funding in the sciences. And if there is additional unexpended funds in a science grant that allows us to make awards to institutions that are not participating in the humanities piece, that will remain an option.
All right, we have a couple questions about allowable costs. The timeline indicates several workshops requiring travel by project directors. How will that travel be funded? I guess the underlying question is, can subaward funding be used to support that travel? And the answer is yes.
I would point out, however, that because graduate deans are the PIs and because many, if not most of you already attend the annual meeting and the summer workshop, you may not, and you are probably already paying those costs. You may choose to use the award monies for other purposes.
Are incentives for survey respondents an allowable cost? How about temporary employees?
It is certainly the case that there is nothing within our current Mellon funding that prohibits incentives to survey participants. I would ask you to think carefully about a couple things about whether this is the best use of funding. One of the problems with an incentive system is it's very, very difficult then to continue to execute a survey when the funding is gone and you don't have a pool of funds to support the students. So there's a real potential downside to using incentives. You'd never know if you tried to keep the project going without incentives if a drop-off in participation was declining interest or if it was declining incentives, and you would have, I think, a real before and after problem with trying to interpret your data. So yes, incentives is an allowable cost if you choose to make that decision. There probably are some things you ought to really think carefully about before making a decision to use the funding in this way.
And then the final question about allowable costs is, are indirect costs allowed? The answer to that is no. That's made clear in the RFP. So, of course, if you anticipate certain expenses, please build those into your budget and make those explicit.
Julia, it occurs to me that one of the other questions about what you could use funding for was, could you use funding for temporary employees? Right. And I expect that would be a very common way in which people would use this funding. So the answer is yes.
If an institution is funded for the humanities portion of this project, would the institution also be funded for the STEM portion if that funding becomes available? I just want to reiterate that We expect to hear about the STEM funders' decision before proposals are due. So we will not have a situation where we would have made the awards in the humanities and then have to decide what to do about the STEM funding. You will have that information before, and we will have that information before the proposals are due on May 1. This is an important question about response rate. Is there a critical response rate that institutions must meet?
So there's no set standard for the response rate for the study. You'll simply be sending this survey to all people who earn the doctoral degree in the fields you're fielding a survey, as well as the current doctoral students. But again, the caution should be paid when you begin to interpret it and start using these data, and making sure that the response rate you see is what you feel comfortable and appropriate for type of data products that you're producing and using in the decision-making process.
And I would just add that as is true for sample size in general, all else being equal, the higher your response rate, the better off it is, and any strategies you can use to increase response rates is absolutely encouraged.
All right. The next question is, will each institution be responsible for setting up the actual survey using its own survey software? How it is set up could affect how the data can be analyzed.
So institutions will be responsible for setting up the survey, and the questionnaires that we developed have very explicit instruction in terms of when to change the pages and the skip logics for surveys. So we certainly we certainly expect all surveys to have very close look from one another, whether it's run by institution A or institution B. But in part of your cost, what you might want to consider in the budget is to make sure that you have appropriate subscription for online survey platforms, or if you already have a native survey platform out of your institution, the use of those platforms are appropriately budgeted. But it'll be your responsibility to create and administer the survey based on the questionnaire we provide to you.
Okay. Relatedly, is there a preferred mode of survey administration? And if online is the preferred mode, is there a preferred survey platform?
So based on the prior report on the Career Pathways project, this is not the matter of preference, but our expectation was that most institutions will go and utilize some type of online survey platform to administer these surveys. In terms of, so it's in the internet. And in terms of which survey platform to go about, again, like we do not have preferred platform, and I think that we do not have a preferred survey platform that we would recommend one way or other on this project. But we would make sure that whatever the platform you choose has appropriate capacity for some of the skip logics and the look that's prescribed in our data collection instrument.
All right. The next question is about identifying survey respondents in the alumni group. What is the expectation for the proportion of alumni we can identify and find? If we may not, is it a problem if we can't identify all alumni going back 15 years?
Obviously, you're going to want to think carefully about your strategy for identifying as close to possible all alumni. We know from experience that you will almost certainly not be able to trace or track or even name 100% of your alums, but the more thoughtful your strategy about how you'll go about enumerating the population, the more competitive the proposal.
Yeah, definitely be encouraged you to be creative about this locating strategy. And this is something that you can work with the other campus offices, alumni office, and others to really track down some of the alumni. And also moving forward, I would definitely encourage you to keep in mind to have these contact information readily available onward, so that when you sustain these data collection efforts, for this time around, you may not be able to locate all people 15 years out, but several years in, you should have easier time in locating and including the people in years out of doctoral program into the survey.
All right. The next question is, will the instruments be shared with institutions that don't get funded? In fact, we have already made the instruments public, and I am trying to open up the web page just to help you see where to find those. If you navigate to the CGS web page that I have up on the screen, which can be found on the home page of the CGS website, you'll see that the PhD alumni survey and the student survey are included there. So they are already public. Another question is, will there be any attempt to survey PhD students who do not complete, particularly those who leave after 2 or 3 years? Now, the student survey is fielded in years 2 and 5, and that survey is intended to be sent to current PhD students at your institution. Now, of course, it's possible for some of those students to become non-completers, and you would, of course, have the responses of those students and analyzing those data in relation to their status as non-completers could be interesting. But the instrument is designed, the 2 instruments are designed to be fielded with students, current students, and with alumni.
One of the reasons we have tried to build in for you as you are able to collect student numbers or identifying information is that some of you may in fact want to do an analysis of attrition, which you could do after the period of the study if you could link survey responses while currently students to administrative records. So to the extent you can build into your thinking, or it's consistent with your policy or IRB approval, to the extent you can use unique student identifiers, it gives you the increased capacity to do some interesting analysis of who fails to complete.
We have time for one final question about the data management plan. Do you have a recommendation on how long institutions should retain their data? We do not have any recommendations. We only suggest that your plans be consistent with the goals of the project that you propose to do. So with that, we'd like to thank you. If we didn't get to your question, we'll be following up with you individually. And you should also feel free to contact us. You'll see contact information for Catherine Stone on the RFP. You can contact her and she will get your question into the hands of the right person. And you can also contact any of us individually. Our email addresses are on the webpage of the CGS website that I'm pointing you to right now. So thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you.